Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to do something a little different here today on Sportswire Radio. No, no, no. He's not a backyard wrestler who we're looking at. No, no, no. He's not somebody that's wrestled overseas. He's actually somebody that I think might have as interesting and a unique story that we've had here yet on Sportswire Radio. And here's why. Our guest this afternoon is a man that is, let's get this straight. Let me repeat it for you, for those that are listening and watching. 31 national parks. I thought it was 29. He told me it was actually 31. Two more since we even spoke last time off the air. On top of that, the man has been all over the world. Nicaragua, Tanzania, California, you name it. He's probably been there, and he's even got a backstory or two on it. And also, speaking about anything else you might want to know what's in the background for, he's apparently one of the largest Pez collectors out there. And I thought Pez was a fad that ended 20 years ago. He's going to tell us why he's into the world of Pez. Plus, who knows what else is on his mind. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring on our guest right now. I want to hear his side of the story. So for those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio, let's give our guest the usual introduction that everybody else has gotten, and even including a very good friend of his you probably heard on here multiple times throughout the 5 years. Some guy named Jason Facina, the head coach of the Five Town Sound men's soccer team. Let's give our great Dane that usual introduction that everybody else has gotten. So let's get right to it, because I guarantee in the world of Pez, in the world of hiking and running, they don't do those intros like we do them here on Sportswire Radio. So with that, without further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show. They call him the Marathon Man and the world's Pez collector. His name is the great Dane Johnsen. My friend, how are you?
I'm doing well. That was some introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think you've gotten any of those yet. I don't know if you will afterwards.
You win.
But first of all, it is obviously a pleasure, and I hope that Mr. Facina, you certainly enjoyed that you got your name mentioned once again on Sportswire, but not for the reasons we usually mention Coach on. But, it's obviously very fascinating, I think, to have you on, because there's a lot to talk about, and it's kind of a step back from usually what we talk about here on Sportswire Radio. For the most part, it's usually all types of wrestling. Our hashtag is All Wrestling Matters. We talk a lot about backyard wrestling, underground wrestling, pro wrestling, whatever else in between in a bag of chips, as the old famous MTV VJ Downtown Julie Brown used to say. But Dane, I'm looking at all this stuff in the background, and my first thought is, okay, well, it's certainly not Funko Pops. It's certainly not a collection of cigarette lighters, but it's actually a collection of Pez. And I have to ask the question, for those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio, the Marathon Man, the great Dane Johnsen, the Pez collector that you are, I mean, what got you into the world of Pez?
Thank you, Tom. It's probably some form of Arrested Development. Trying to relive my childhood a little bit. But it started with Yoda.
Wow. Okay.
So most people, when they see, or if they're even familiar with Pez at all, they see them at the supermarket, they see them at the drugstore, they see them at, the end of the aisle somewhere.
Yep.
And I have a supermarket near me, and they had just re-released the Star Wars films at the end of the 90s. Okay. And they made a bunch of these Star Wars Pez, and I grabbed a Yoda, and I was like, I'm playing with, and the candy was all right, but I got Yoda, and then I got Darth Vader, and then I got the Stormtrooper, and then Chewbacca, and then I had the set. I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then I saw they had Looney Tunes, and then they had Smurfs. And as someone that's not okay with moderation, it just got really out of hand really quickly.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. That's kind of actually when I remember Pez. You talked about the late 90s. I remember the reason you said the Star Wars re-releases. I remember I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I remember as a kid, my brother was into Star Wars, and this had been right before the Star Wars kind of films got remade. And I was kind of almost fascinated by it. My brother sort of was into it. I remember was buying all the Star Wars VHSs, the first 3 movies, and then I was like, well, I wasn't into that. But, why did you stay with Pez?
I just it was just something to do. I don't know. I like the hunt. I like collecting. I like talking to people that are also into it. I guess the same way that you talk to a lot of wrestlers.
Yeah.
It's a community. It's a community, and it's a hobby.
Well, I could see it's a really fascinating hobby. As a matter of fact, I kind of had a feeling this. I actually have some comments from some friends of mine on YouTube that want to talk to you about it. But I mean, so when you started collecting and you talked about obviously the late 90s, so I can kind of have an idea. We're talking about like 1998, 1999. When you were collecting, what did your folks say at the time? What were they like? You became this big Pez collector, and how did they take it?
I still don't consider myself a big Pez collector, but
Really?
I mean, it's out of control. But anyway, it was quirky. It was something silly. When I was a kid, my dad, we took a road trip to Cleveland to go to this giant Pez convention, and
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was kind of like, oh, I'm around other people that are weird like me, and I felt a little bit of acceptance there. And I think now as an adult, they think it's a little weird, but when I was younger, they were like, all right, whatever floats your boat, kind of thing.
But let me ask you a question on this. So you go to this convention, right? And that's obviously an out of body experience, right? I'm imagining you're a kid from Long Island, and you go all the way to Cleveland, right? Cleveland is, how can I put it? It's not quite Hollywood of the United
No.
States. It's not quite where people are fascinated about, let's say, Disneyland or Disney World or New York City, where I'm from. It's Cleveland. It's almost like, I don't know, how can I say this in a nice way? To some people, I like Ohio. We have a lot of wrestlers that come up from Ohio, but Ohio is kind of like the ashtray of the United States in a lot of ways.
Ooh.
I mean, but I said I'm a fan, like I said, but my point is that when you go to Cleveland, you see all these different people that are around. I mean, what was that like? And people you've never met before, and you're in a place, Cleveland of all places.
Well, I have two. So I went as a kid, but then I also started going as an adult in the last couple of years. So it's kind of
Okay.
two different versions. But as a kid, it just, people were really nice to you. The way it works is you get there and people do this thing called room hopping, where you go in different hotel rooms and people have stuff out on their bed and you can buy and trade and whatever. And they were nice. They would give me free stuff. They would give me candies. They'd say, it's cool that you're here with your pop, that kind of thing.
I do remember the Pez candies, by the way. I do
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
them.
I'll send you.
Yes, I remember that very well. Yes.
I got a bunch of stuff on the desk here. But yeah, and then as an adult, I started going again a couple of years ago to local conventions in Connecticut and Pennsylvania and back to Cleveland. And it's a little different as an adult. You have actual money to spend, and but yeah, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, it's a community. The people are great. They're a little quirky, but
listen. All right, before I say anything, look at me, right? I've got these long mutton chops, which I haven't shaved off now in over 5 years. I've got long hair, well, not as long hair as everybody else may have in the world, but I am probably the definition of quirky in many ways. I've got these mutton chops that I haven't shaved off literally in 5+ years. You could see my hair. So clearly, I mean, I'm definitely not one to talk, but I have actually some people that do want to talk to you and actually say hello. Let me get to them. My buddy, Michael Blackheart from the state of Indiana, which I love the state of Indiana, by the way. Hello, Reb. That is a very impressive Pez collection. I am a collector of many things. I've been running a long time as well. Doing my first ultra in October. Is that Pez related? Is ultra?
no,
Pez?
I think he's doing a distance longer than a marathon.
Oh, okay, yes,
Yeah.
and I'm going to come back to that. Yes, because I actually know that people are going to be fascinated about that. I want to say, speaking of collectors, by the way, in addition to being one of our favorite wrestlers of all time, also in addition to being maybe the most popular British independent wrestler out there in the world, He's got a big following on YouTube. His name is the Tribal Cheese Logan. He's on YouTube at Mad Manx. He meets all these famous people in the world. A couple of people you've probably known. Matt Damon, he's met some of the famous actors. Carl Weathers, God rest his soul, unfortunately passed away. Everybody knows Carl Weathers, and he's met pretty much every big name wrestler out there in the world, and they acknowledge him. So we're going to acknowledge him for a second. Pez Rules, seen this belting documentary on Netflix about it. Do you get asked about that documentary, by the way, a lot?
So about a year ago, there was a documentary, or maybe it was a little longer than that, a year and a half ago, called The Pez Outlaw that was produced.
Yes, he mentioned that. Yes, the Pez.
Yeah,
Outlaw.
I think that's what he's referring to. And it's about this guy named Steve Glue who went over to Europe and brought a bunch of really hard to find Pez back to the States. I know it sounds bizarre.
No. Listen, you're in the right place. Listen, you're actually in the right place. Because like I said, I am the definition of quirky. We don't judge, because I have interviewed through my 5 years on Sportswire. Listen, we're friends with Jason Facine. I mean, that's just
right. Exactly.
Right?
There's got to be something wrong with us.
Well, there's a lot of things wrong with me. Trust me. I've had British wrestlers. Some of them think that, we should be boycotted. I've had other people say that I've gotten in the middle of different things. I shoot on people too often. So don't feel too bad. But, when he went to, let's say, the Pez Outlaw documentary, I'm sure you've seen the documentary. So what's it like outside of the United States in Pez collections? What is the difference maybe in other places around the world?
It's biggest in my opinion, in America and in Europe.
Okay.
There's a little bit of action in Japan, but for the most part, those are the hot spots. Mainly Europe, because that's where they were produced, especially the older stuff like Austria, former Yugoslavia, that kind of thing. And Pez were produced in America for a while too, but most of the new stuff, and the factories in Orange, Connecticut. So those are the two big hot spots.
Let me ask you a silly question here, and I'll come back to a few more comments. When I used to get Pez confused with Pogs. You remember Pogs as a kid? You remember the Pogs? People.
Sure, of course. Yep.
Yeah. So what was the difference between Pogs and Pez? Why has Pez lasted longer than, let's say, Pogs? I remember as a kid, this had to have been, I'm probably dating myself a little bit. This was 1995. And I remember for whatever reason, as I mentioned, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and we used to, sit on the stoops. It was a thing as a kid. You'd sit on the stoops and you'd throw a blue ball to the stoop from back to the ground, and you try to catch it, and then you'd have these Pogs. So why did Pez kind of have this niche popularity where Pogs didn't? I'm just curious on why has Pez had this following.
I mean, I'll give you. I don't want to be too long-winded about it, but
no. Listen, I got nothing to do. So
all right. Yours. Pez, they're coming up. The company itself's coming up on its 100-year anniversary. They've been around for a long, long time, and Pez originally started as a mint for smokers. So what you would do is you'd carry around like a little tin like this, right?
Oh, okay. Like the Altoids almost.
Right.
Okay.
Kind of like an early version of Altoids. And then eventually what they did was, this is a very early, it's called a regular.
Okay, I've seen those. Those I remembe seeing.
The candies that you're familiar with
are the ones with the Pez.
Right. The peppermints would go in here, right? And then you'd have a cigarette, you'd pop it open, right? And then in the 50s, they started putting character heads on it. And that's what you're probably most familiar with.
Yes. That right. I do remember that. I remember the Pez. In fact, you're going to probably chuckle. And I remember Pez being sold, and I don't know if they have them where you live, but where I was growing up, and they have them even now in Staten Island. They had what's called a 99-cent store, and the 99-cent stores would sell the Pez. And I would look at these Pez, and sometimes I would see like little kids buy the Pez's, and I was kind of like, well, that's interesting. And obviously they've had a niche. I didn't realize they'd been around 100 years. I did not know that Pez had been around that long. So that means Pez has actually been around longer than baseball cards. People, as a kid, would go up and collect baseball cards. And one of the things I used to collect was actually wrestling cards. I was big into wrestling trading cards. We would get these, they would be called, and the Tribal Cheese are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. They would have then the WWF ice cream bars. We would buy an ice cream bar, and we would get a trading card with the ice cream bar. So in a way, Pez has actually been around longer than, trading cards. I didn't know that. That's a really fascinating thing to know.
Yeah, so like to answer your question full circle, so to make, I guess, the Pog comparison, Pogs were kind of a fad that kind of came in and out for a couple of years, where Pez is multi-generational. So what you see today is when you see a parent or an aunt and uncle, brother, sister buying something as a stocking stuffer or buying a Pez for a kid, it's because they remember it from when they were younger. There's a sense
Yeah,
of nostalgia there.
you know what? That's a great point because again, it was Pogs, and then it was Beanie Babies. I remember Beanie Babies one year was like it was the world couldn't stop unless you didn't buy somebody a Beanie Baby. Pogs, I remember as a kid. Then it was Beanie Babies right afterward. I don't know if Beanie Babies is still a thing, but Pez, 100 years. I did not know that it's been around that long. Maybe Jason Facina secretly has Pogs and Beanie Babies for all I know. He might
I
look like
know for a fact he does.
I'm sure he does. I got a bunch of comments here. Let me go up to the tribal because he's a collector, by the way. He's on YouTube at Mad Manx, and he's got a lot of rare stuff. I collect really rare UFC fight worn jerseys from the show The Ultimate Fire. Yeah, I remember The Ultimate Fire. That was on Spike TV here in America, if I'm not mistaken, if I recall correctly. And thank you to Tribal Cheese. You know, we actually gave a day after him. A couple weeks ago, he was on Sportswire. We actually, on all of our platforms, gave him a day. I probably should have gave you a day, actually, on Sportswire. But maybe stay tuned. Stay tuned. This is an interesting show. Do not worry about it if everything was the same. Nothing would be unique. I have been tuned in from the start and not turned off. I told you Pez would be interesting. I actually got a good question for you. What's the highest price that you've ever paid for a Pez? That's a great question.
In the interest of my wife and my parents that might see this, I'm going to plead the fifth. I will.
I like you already.
I will say over 4 figures.
Oh wow! Oh, yeah, I was thinking it's like $100, maybe $50.
Yeah,
all right, fine. Wow,
the old
wow.
Stuff is quite valuable. The stuff from the 50s, the 60s, the real can be quite hard to find.
Wow, I would never. Okay, now autographs and jerseys and let's say trading cards. I get that stuff. 5 figures. I was always told as a kid, well, Tommy, you got to make sure you keep all your stuff in mint condition. You got to get them graded. And, listen, I won't plead the fifth. You can say nothing on this. I'm fortunate financially that, I can keep my card collection, my autograph stuff, and I don't need to go out and sell it. I don't need to get it graded. But there are people that, can do it and, they can make a living off it. I was never into that kind of thing. But, that's fascinating. Wow, 4 figures. I actually want to come back to the Tribal Cheese, but Michael Blackheart, who's a runner, by the way, actually wants to know, this is a great interview. I'm loving the information. Have you ever heard of the Berkeley Marathon?
Of course, the race that eats its young. It's
want to talk about it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's a great documentary on it. I forgot the name of it, but if you punch in Berkeley Marathon documentary, you could find it. But yeah, the guy that developed the Backyard Ultra, that's his original race, and I believe it's in Tennessee in this insane. I think it's called I forgot the name of the park. It's a state park, but basically people run through the worst possible conditions you can think of for 100-ish miles. It goes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's awful. Really, really hardcore.
Wow. I'm going to come back to it because you've actually been in places like Nicaragua. I don't think I said it right. You could clearly tell I'm from Brooklyn. I can't pronounce anything correctly. Tanzania. So you've been to some of these places. I'm going to get to that here. But the Tribal Cheese was like, he didn't like your answer. That's okay.
That's the only thing I'll plead the fifth on the whole interview. I
got the point. You paid a lot of money for Pez, and I don't blame you. Your wife's probably in the background with the kids, and it's like, okay, you know what? Don't tell me what the figure is because she's probably looking at it like, 401k doesn't that. The collection is very impressive, but you being on top of that is true respect. Yeah, you know what? I got to be honest. I do. I know you were mentioning before. I'm like, I don't know if I want to talk about Pez. No. Trust me. We here on Sportswire, I talk with people all over the place. I talk with people from different backgrounds. We never judge people. And I knew this would be an exciting interview. And, take it from me. Again, I've got probably the longest mutton chops in the world. I've got hair that's obviously, probably people would like, I would want to pay me to cut it. But the point is that, I think you have shown a dedication and a love to something. You have shown the ability that, what? If you want to do something and you want to maintain it, why not? I always hate when people try to conform. I always hate when people try to change and be something that they aren't to try to fit in with others. And I really like the fact that you're a part of something and a part of a community that you're able to be yourself. And I think that that's why, we want you here. And also, I have a question from the Tribal Cheese. Do you know if there's any WWF or WWE related Pez out there?
There are. I'm not going to go grab them now, but there's an Undertaker. I think there's a John Cena. It comes in a 3-pack. It comes in a tin. I'm blanking on the third one, but yeah, there's a couple of WWE. They're fairly easy to find.
I would have thought there would have been a Hulk Hogan related Pez. I would have thought there would have had to have been a Hulk Hogan related Pez.
Or Mick Foley, maybe. Mick Foley Pez would be great.
Local guy. Mick Foley's from not too far from where you guys. And I think that's a good point. Thank you for that question. Also, Michael wants to say, I didn't know this about Michael. Michael said, and I've known Michael a while. I don't know why Michael never told me this. I've applied every year since I was 18. It's the end game, the Berkeley Marathon.
Yeah. Very hard to get into. I believe I don't think they do a lottery system. You have to have run another ultra that's close to as difficult in order to get in. It's very, very hard. People from all over the world try to get into the Berkeley.
I'm going to come back to the running, but I have to ask you a question when it comes to Pez. I don't know.
What do you got?
No, one question. Listen, I like to give people the opportunity to speak. We on Sportzwire, in fact, some people, I think, so I don't want to say it was, somebody messaged me and it's like, wow, you're like a talk show host. You let people speak. It's almost like confessions with the Reverend. I don't know if it's quite to that level, but some people do think that. But do you ever have people come over the house and just want to see you just for the Pez?
So what'll happen is, yeah, it's happened. Generally when friends come over for the first time, or like whoever, someone that hasn't been here before, after we get them settled and give them something to drink or whatever, my wife will be like, okay, I know you want to show them. And then I come downstairs and I give them a tour. I call it the Pez Museum. And and I have two versions. There's a short version where I could just tell them a couple things for 10 minutes. And then there's like, how much do you want to know?
Call me crazy. I think one day I should probably interview you from your house.
That would be amazing. You can come anytime.
I tell you what, I think that might be actually something interesting. I'm sure I think, I actually think that if I do it on Instagram, I have 1,400 followers on Instagram. I think if I even do it on YouTube, I'm going to get a lot of people. I think, stay tuned. I might do that when the weather warms up a little bit. I think.
All right. We'll get the scene in here. It'll be great.
Well, that might even be more reason to do it. That'd be very fascinating. I have to ask you a question. I don't want to sound Howard Stern on you, but what did your wife think when the first minute she saw the Pez and heard you were a Pez collector? I find that almost in a way the most interesting question to ask you.
She just kind of rolls her eyes and, she doesn't make excuses. She just like, I mean, I would say a couple days a week there, there's boxes coming in the mailbox from eBay, from people on Facebook, like I trade with, like there's boxes like 4 or 5 days a week. So, and either they're coming or going, and she just kind of accepts it now. She doesn't really give me a hard time.
Yeah, I just, I always thought, because that's one of the toughest things when, let's say you date someone, or then you've obviously married your wife and you have a family, and they're kind of like, people look at that. Well, I remember as a kid, collecting cards, and, they always say, well, a girl wouldn't like you collecting this or collecting that. But, people sometimes get used to it. I remember, I'm sure he won't listen to this. My brother played the drums, and he was going out with a girl. This was obviously, he's married and has 2 kids now, but he was going out with this one girl. He was in a band, and the girlfriend he had hated him being in the band, so he gave up the band. So people do things for different reasons. Obviously, look, it probably worked out for the better. He's got a family, but that these people have different things for different reasons. I want to know it all. The Berkeley, you write a letter saying why you should be there. It's like a $1.95 entry fee, an article of clothing. What's that? Actually, that's fascinating to go to that for a second. What is that about? Tell me.
I'm not like by any means an expert on the Barkley Marathon. I just know that I think that's about right. But there's also like, you have to have some credentials as well. Like you can't just apply and write a great letter and get in. Like you had to have done some damage in another race somewhere, especially a difficult ultra like that.
Well, speaking of damage, I'll come back to Pez as we're here with the marathon man himself. He is the world's Pez collector, as I like to call him, the great Dane Johnsen here. And my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. You know my name by now, but if you like to follow Dane, he's actually on Instagram. You can check him out here. It's very simple, very straightforward, to the point. He's very well known. make sure you check him out. That's his Instagram. So make sure you follow him, say hello. And the Tribal Cheese maybe can share collectible stories with you. And you could talk Pez and he could talk his autographs. And maybe you could have a Pez autograph club. I don't know. But, I want to talk about a thing in particular that you've run called Devil's Path. Can you talk about Devil's Path? Because when I think about that, well, maybe most don't come back. Can you talk about that to start for a few minutes?
Yeah, sure. So the Devil's Path is it's a hike that's up in the Catskills. My brother lives up in Saugerties, so
I know Saugerties. Yes, I do.
Yeah, the trailhead for the Devil's Path is maybe a half-hour drive from him, give or take. But what happened was I was looking for a challenge of some sort, and I Googled most difficult hikes in the Northeast, and this Devil's Path kept coming up, and I'm like, what's the deal with this? Like, what makes it so difficult? So I got a buddy of mine, and you can do it as a day hike, but it's really, really, like, I think it's like 28 miles, which hiking in a day is a lot. Like a lot.
Sure. That I know.
We did it over 2 days, but the first day, I mean, we were totally broken. It's just you're either going straight up or straight down every mile of the hike. There's very limited water, so you have to carry a lot of weight on your back while you're hiking. But I mean, it's just you could touch the ground in front of you for 20 something miles, and it's awful. We managed to finish it, but by the end, we were totally broken.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, so how do you prepare for something where okay, there's no water, or you only can put water on a backpack and an emergency kit, and you go to these places you don't know anything about? I mean, what is that like?
I want to say it's kind of an acquired skill. I mean, I've done a lot of backpacking, both day hikes and overnights. The longest I've been out by myself is a week without like supplies. But you kind of pick up little tricks of the trade. The internet's a great resource, talking to people, reading up on it. But I think the bottom line is when you're out in the wilderness, even though we have cell phones and, in a pinch, maybe you could get a helicopter, like you're on your own. You're on your own. Like if you need to have confidence in your ability to like self-arrest and if something, if you know what hits the fan, like, can you do what you need to do to get out of there?
I'm going to ask you about Nicaragua and Tanzania in a few minutes. I think people are going to find that really fascinating. But, do you ever get nervous? You're alone out there? I mean, how do you feel about that? How do you overcome those things?
I don't want to sound like overconfident, but I know. By
all means, on this platform, we have hundreds of wrestlers come on. By all means, feel free to be overconfident.
What I mean is I have confidence in my abilities, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I know what my limits are, and I know that like where I can kind of push myself. There have been times like there's a mountain in California that I've tried to climb twice that I can't seem to get to the top of. This mountain called Mount Shasta. For some reason, I get altitude sickness. I just can't summit that mountain, and it drives me nuts. And I will keep trying to do it until I complete it. But I think it's knowing when to quit. It's knowing also too, like, preparation and just putting in the work.
Wow. Well, something tells me that the Olive Garden loving Jason Facina is not going any of these hikes anytime soon. But I was just being friendly. We love Coach though. We love Coach though.
Endless breadsticks.
Yeah, that's what I hear through the grapevine. And then again, I've actually never eaten an Olive Garden. I can actually tell you, I've actually never been to Olive Garden because again, I'm from Brooklyn. Olive Garden's almost like, to me, it's like going to like if you have like frozen pizza almost. Let's hear right there. 24 miles in a high elevation. That's just nasty but fun. Wow. Okay. I want to say hello real quick to one of my buddies out on Twitch because we're on Twitch now, and he's become one of my favorites recently. Sir, thanks a lot, 9,000. But would you do that hike again for Devil's Path?
Oh, absolutely. I would do it all again. When you finish, you're hating life and you just want to go take an ice bath and you're like, I'm never doing that again. And then after a couple of days, and I'm sure a lot of your wrestler listeners could relate. Like
I was going to ask you about that in the training in a few minutes.
Yeah, you're sore, you're like, you're beat up. And then after a couple of days, you're like, I'll do it again.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. You know what? It's the adrenaline rush. It's the adrenaline. The adrenaline takes away the pain because you want to go back out there and do it. I was hearing a wrestler, I think it was Jeff Jarrett, who spoke about this on his podcast this morning. Funny you said that. He talked about, you have ways to kind of almost mask the pain, basically, and the adrenaline kind of mask that pain that you go through, because it's almost like, I want to go out and do that again. I want to go out there and, just do it, because just what that feeling is. And Michael also wants to say respect to you again, Dane. You're a dad of twins like myself. Obviously, congratulations on being a dad. I actually did want to ask you, and places like Tanzania, Nicaragua, these places are kind of, fascinating. I mean, I think when we were speaking the first time originally about several weeks ago, and I was like, wow, what are those places like? I mean, what made you want to go to those places and go venture there and wind up trying to, complete tasks in those areas? And what was that about?
So when I travel, I'm not like a world traveler by any means. I mean, I've been to like probably 13 countries, but when I go somewhere new, I look for something challenging to do while I'm there. So I was in Costa Rica, and I noticed that Nicaragua wasn't too far away, and I actually climbed this active volcano in the middle of a lake.
Oh wow!
It was called Ometepe Island.
Oh wow!
In the middle of Lake Nicaragua, but yeah, it was a little sketchy. I mean, Nicaragua's I don't want to be insulting, but a borderline third world country.
Well, I mean, we go back as a kid. What was it, was it Manuel Ortega or Noriega, where they were? Was it President?
Yeah, he was Panama, but yeah, no, but same neck of the woods. And but anyway, yeah, it was a little sketchy, and it was very challenging. I had to hire a local guide to go up with me, and
oh wow.
At the top, I didn't realize this, but at the top of the active volcano, there's a lot of sulfur that like spewing out, and if you inhale that too much, you can pass out.
Oh my god!
It's like toxic, I guess. So I was up there and I was collecting lava rocks, and I started to get lightheaded. And I'm glad I got out of there, because if I stayed a little longer, I might have passed out without any help nearby.
Oh wow! I mean, so I gotta ask you about the sulfur. I mean, that's stuff we might see playing video games or stuff we see like in movies. I mean, so when you see the sulfur, I mean, did you take photos, or did you just like what was that like? I mean, I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's not like when you're in Hawaii, you see those pictures of Hawaii with like the lava bubbling. It wasn't like that, but you're at the top of this rim of this crater, and you're looking down, and yeah, there's just like this white, very thick smoke coming out of it. And I'm not 100% sure. It smelled like rotten eggs, so I'm guessing it was but yeah, no, it was very surreal. It was very cool. You're like on top of the world, and of the clouds, and it's pretty neat.
For whatever reason, I don't know why you're gonna chuckle, but I saw the movie. This is before COVID, Dora the Explorer, and it reminds me of the live version of Dora the Explorer when they're out there. They had all that kind of the wilderness and the the sulfur and the volcanoes, and I don't know. You were almost kind of like the modern version of Dora the Explorer there. So when you go, you go to Nicaragua, you obviously accomplished this, but then Tanzania. What is Tanzania like now? If I'm not mistaken, isn't that closer to Australia, if I recall correctly, right? Somewhere around there.
Tanzania is in East Africa.
Okay.
It's very close to the equator. It borders it borders Kenya.
Oh wow, okay.
But yeah, so Tanzania has the highest point in the continent of Africa, Mount Kilimanjaro. Wow. So I went there a couple of years back, I guess 3 years ago now, to hike Mount Kilimanjaro.
Wow. Okay. And what made you want to go there? What was it? Hey, you know what? I want to go there and I want to do this. What was that like?
I honestly, it sounded really cool. I'm like, I'll probably never go to Africa ever again. I had an uncle who I do a lot of hiking with who said he was game. So we just trained our butts off and made it happen.
And you said you did this 3 years ago. So you did this like, I guess right around or after the real peak of COVID. So was there any?
No, my timing's off. It was probably it was about a year before.
Oh, okay.
Before COVID started. Yeah.
So you basically so what was it like when you're there and you're basically in the middle of all this, and what was the atmosphere like over there? I mean, I just find that so fascinating.
I mean, the country itself and the cities that I was in, I mean, couldn't be more different than what you and I are used to. I mean, they were densely populated cities, but obviously, like, poverty is a huge issue there, and a lot of the local economy revolves around tourism and getting people up this mountain. And what's kind of crazy is when you get there, it's relatively flat. Like, you think of, it's where the Lion King takes place, like the savannah. like open grassland and whatever.
Okay.
And then there's just this mountain that's 19,000 feet in the air. It looks like something out of Lord of the Rings. You're just like, and you could see it from, hundreds of miles in every direction. It's
I
just,
like you. I like you. Why haven't you been on Howard Stern before? I feel like you would have been
I love Howard Stern. I listen
You
to
would have been so perfect for Howard Stern. I feel like I know Howard's a little different show than he was, but I feel like you would have been so perfect on with Howard, and he would have been asking you these. I mean, actually, some people have said I kind of am like Howard a little bit, although I don't think I quite have the fame that he has. But I find that fascinating that you'd want to go there. And then, what were the people like over there?
some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life.
Definitely not like Long Island people, for sure.
No, definitely not. Definitely not like Long Island or the city. But but no, like on beautiful, beautiful country, beautiful people. There was a guides that took us to the top. It was a whole team of people bringing up, pots and pans and tents, and it wasn't just like what you think of. It was like an expedition. There was a team of, I don't know, a dozen guys.
How long were you there for?
I was there for almost 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And I also went on a safari when I was there. That was pretty wild.
What's the time difference there between here and over there? What was that time difference? Was it hard?
I want to say like 8 hours, maybe 8 or 9 hours.
Is that hard to adjust when you go to these different places in the time setting? Is that, I always ask athletes this question. We had a guy, Luke Leyland, who went to Nigeria, actually, speaking of Africa, and he fought in what's called Dambe, kind of like a throwback to a mix of UFC and boxing. You'd probably be good at you'd probably be good at Dambe. And he fought there, and we asked him, what was the difference like in the time, and what was the difference in adjusting to your body and the food, and I'm asking you the same question because you went from New York over to Tanzania, and what was that like in adjusting from the time difference and also the food and such? What did you eat in terms of keeping your body, obviously nourished, and to be able to compete in this, doing something that again is very few people do?
So what I try to do when I go, even like I go to California every summer too. It's only 3 hours, but
yeah, California, I guess.
The trick is to just, whatever time you get there, to just adapt to that time. So if you get there at 5 in the afternoon and you normally go to bed at 10 o'clock, you go to bed at 10 o'clock. Like just pretend as if it's the time that you're used to, and your internal clock like will adjust.
Well, my clock is always off. I'd be dead then. So if I went there, basically, because my sleep schedule is just never the same, I probably would be dead in about 15 minutes. But thankfully, I wasn't the one running, but you were. What's the food like over there? What did you eat?
So it's tricky because you have to be very careful with water, right? Because you can get sick from tainted water very easily. I had to get malaria shots and stuff too. You have to get a bunch of shots before you go. But with food, you're basically like, you need everything to be cooked, like almost to the point of like burnt, because you don't want to, and like produce, you got to be careful of produce and fruit, because like all of it can make you sick.
So it's fun. I'm glad that somebody actually said, well, you have to cook the food burnt, because as a kid, and people are going to, whoever watches this, Coach Vicina, include anybody else that does watch this on YouTube or anywhere else, I have always, since I'm a kid, when it comes to especially meat, I've always wanted my food well done or burnt because of kind of those reasons. So I'm glad somebody actually confirms what I've said because I remember as a kid, but this was just, as a kid, my mother cooked a hamburger for us. This was when we were growing up in Brooklyn. At times were what they were at those times. She cooked it on in the frying pan, and the burger tasted like, oh my God, it was like I could have died from the burger. From that moment, I was like, I will not eat any hamburger unless it's well done, any meat well done. Even since what's the one thing that's kept me in good health? I very rarely eat McDonald's. I only eat Wendy's like once in a blue moon, although some people think I eat Wendy's all the time. And same with Burger King. So I've always been very well done and burnt, and I'm glad you confirmed that for me. Thank you very much, by the way.
No problem.
And Mr. Michael Blackheart wants to say, I do medium rare, got to use the juices from the steak with my fries. Okay, so I want to come back then to Nicaragua. Conversely there, what did you do to eat and be able to stay nourished in that place? Because I should have asked you that question about 10 minutes ago. So what was that like over there in terms of how you stayed hydrated and nourished to complete what you wanted?
Well, the hike in Nicaragua was a day hike. I did a series of day hikes. So those are a little easier to prepare for because you could just bring packaged foods with you. like things that are safe, like energy gels and
Sure.
granola bars and stuff like that.
Power bars, yeah, that I get.
Nuts.
Yeah.
That's not hard, but when it's multi-day and you have to have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner with you, and also cook it, that's where it gets tricky. So with Nicaragua, it wasn't really a big deal. With Tanzania, there were people in the camp that were like the camp cooks. So they would make like, oatmeal porridge. They would do stuff that's like quick and easy with not a lot of meat, like bean soups.
Hey, Michael, actually, it's funny you said that. Michael last week on the show, because I kept saying this wrong for like 6 months. It's actually, he was saying it was his father-in-law. It's actually his stepfather. He actually made, who's Festus Davis, a referee in a company we do work with called XCW. We're inducting in our Hall of Fame. He had basically said bean soup to him, and you actually mentioned bean soup. What a small world.
Yeah, salty, high protein, good fuel.
Wow. You know what? I certainly give you a lot of credit for that. And I want to say hello to my buddy, Mr. Ron Franklin. Ron is out there in the state of Pennsylvania. Ron, how you doing out there? Ron, I think you're going to enjoy this interview. We're actually doing something a little different because we're here with our marathon man. He is the world Pez collector. He is the great Dane Johnsen. And we're talking about his background. He has been in 13 different countries. He's been in 31 different national parks. He's one of the world's most known Pez collectors. Well, I said you're one of the most known Pez collectors. You're the only one I know. And we're talking about his unique journey. And I hope you stay with us. And also, we're on YouTube. If you're on YouTube out there, you're checking us out, give me a sub. I just passed over 500 subscribers. I'm at 525 before we went on the air. I've actually gained about 150 of them almost in the last 3 months. So people seem to like what we're doing on Sportswire Radio. People like the quirkiness. People like the mutton chops. People like the long hair. And it seems like everybody else is liking the great Dane Johnsen, who you can also check out on Instagram. And Ron, if you're out there, give this man a follow. He's very fascinating. He's very interesting. He might really be the world's most fascinating, maybe like those commercials, beer commercials. Maybe you could be the guy instead because you have a lot more of an interesting journey. And follow him out there. And also, I'll be back on the air 11 o'clock Eastern time to induct into our Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame from DKW, Dark Cryptic Wrestling, Dark Cron, and Matthew Forsaken. We're all Forsaken. I'm going to try to go to the movies in between. I really want to go see a movie. I haven't gone to a movie in a while. I saw Beekeeper recently. You probably would have been good in Beekeeper, actually. Jason Statham probably would have been, keeping. You probably do collect bees like Jason Statham does. You probably were a beekeeper at some point, I'm sure, as well. But I'm going to hope to go to the movies. I want to see this new movie, Argyle, but we'll have to see if I make it there in time because I promise you people are going to want to tune in and hang out. But I want to also say, Ron says you're a lucky man. You definitely are a lucky man. And thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. You were awesome. He's been one of our new followers on Twitch because we're on Twitch out there. So if you're on Twitch, make sure you give me a follow at Sportswire Radio because we're certainly now going in other places on social media. People are telling me TikTok. I haven't quite got the TikTok yet, but Twitch I kind of like. But, I have to ask you, I want to definitely come back to Pez, but talk to me about Yosemite because I always heard about as a kid Yosemite in government class and history class about Yosemite National Park. And, you've been there and what's that experience like?
Oh, I mean, it's my favorite, hands down. No question.
Tell me why.
30 or so I've been to. The best way I could describe it. I'm going to mention another one just to give an analogy, but you can look at pictures of the Grand Canyon, right? You could watch a video of the Grand Canyon on your TV or on your phone or whatever. But until you're standing at the rim and you're looking down 3,000 feet and you're looking what a river did over millions of years, it's just not the same thing. And when you go to Yosemite and you're looking down, what's called tunnel view, it's unbelievable. There's waterfalls and it's a magical place.
What inspired you to go to all these places? Like, how do you know I'm going to go here? I'm going to go there. I find that fascinating.
So I'm a school teacher and, obviously, I have my summers off and,
nice.
I used to just, I wanted something to do over the summer. So I started with, I started with Acadia up in Maine and,
wow.
And then I would look for like little clusters. So I would see like, where can I visit 2 or 3 within, a couple 100-mile radius and do like a little trip. And every summer I would just go on trips and sometimes I would bring somebody, sometimes I go by myself.
You definitely didn't bring Jason. I can promise you on that.
No, Jason. Yeah, no, he didn't come.
No, love coach.
We love the coach. But yeah, I would just, and then it became like a thing. Like, let me see if I could get to all of them. I'm about halfway there right now.
Wow. So what is on your list that you haven't gone to?
I mean, one day I would love to go to Alaska and just
Yeah,
but there's
it's funny. People talk about. People have said to me, and I'm always amazed at this, that people actually want to go to Alaska. And why do you want to go to Alaska?
I mean, they're just some of the parks there. If you know, like Denali and there's one called Gates of the Arctic where
Oh wow.
you show up. There's a little ranger station, and then there's a couple thousand miles of wilderness in one direction, and they just give you a rifle and they say, "Watch out for bears." You're on your own.
Wow.
Good luck.
Wow. Now, would you want to go to Alaska? I'm curious on this. Would you want to go to Alaska in the summer or the winter?
It'd have to be the summer slash spring, just because in the winter most of this would be you couldn't access it.
Okay.
Yeah, with all the snow.
In summer, I think Alaska's the place. It's there's the what stays light like one day when it's the equinox, right till like 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that. two
Yeah, when I
o'clock.
went to Iceland, that was the deal. They had 21 hours of daylight.
Oh wow.
So it would be light out like it is right now at 2 o'clock in the morning. And you want to talk about your clock getting messed up? You couldn't sleep a wink.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Alaska's interesting. Yeah, people I always found that fascinating that people want to visit Alaska. And I would be like, well, why would you want to go to Alaska? And the parks. I think that's really, fascinating that, that's a place on your list. And Mount Whitney. Can you talk about Mount Whitney for us?
Yeah. So Mount Whitney is the highest point in the lower 48 in the continental United States.
Oh
It's
wow.
in the Sierra Nevada mountains in
Okay.
I would say central-ish California.
Okay.
Um, yeah, most there's a lot of mountains in Colorado that are close, but Whitney's the tallest, and it's a brutal day hike. It is really really difficult. I've been up there, I think 3 times. Um, but yeah, it's just straight up and straight down, and you have to start in the dark, you end in the dark. It's very challenging.
You said you were a school teacher, and I'm curious about this. You can answer this any way you want. Do you ever use, I don't know if you teach history or not, but do you ever to your students talk about the places you visited in a way to maybe educate them or maybe enlighten them on the vast amount of different things that, the United States or just even around the world has to offer that maybe might want to make them feel that they could learn more and kind of do things to make them, better individuals, things like that. I'm just curious on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, as a matter of fact, I do teach history, and yeah, I try to tie it in whenever I can. I mean, you don't want to be like, the old man with the photo album, like, "Look at
Well, I
me."
would listen. You would have threw me out of your class because I was one of those students. It was like if I wasn't into it, I was basically going to disrupt your class. Well, that's why I'm here, pretty much. You probably would have hated me as one of your students, but I'm sure you have a lot better students than I would. Because so that's why I'm here, and that's why you are there in the classroom doing a great job. But I just think that I'm sure you're not an old man, so you're obviously not an old man. But
No,
I could see that, I would just think it would be fascinating. There would be some in the room that would like maybe want to just, hear about these places. I just think that's fascinating as a school teacher. You have a pulpit to maybe, educate and enlighten others, especially your students, to maybe, want to explore and read about things that they may never see.
yeah, I try to. I try to advocate for them just getting outside. I work in New York City, the concrete jungle, and there's 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 not a lot of wide open spaces. There's not a lot of green spaces, and I
Yeah.
tell them like, you could get on a subway and you could go to Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx, or you're from Staten Island. There's plenty of parks in Staten Island.
There's the green belt. Yeah. You have the
Sure,
green
yeah,
belt. There's
there's
High Rock Park. Yep.
Prospect
Fresh
Park or
Hills.
Central Park, but
Yeah.
just get out, go be in nature, go touch grass. They just my biggest
Well,
message.
you know what? Let me ask you this, and I'll come back to more worldly stuff. In New York City, obviously, me being from New York City, where have you maybe gone into some bigger parks or of no? Have you gone to anything in New York City of note?
Um, I mean, from a hiking standpoint, New York City's a little limited.
It's the green belt. You've got High Rock.
I mean, when I lived in Brooklyn, I ran in Prospect Park all the time and explored every inch of it. Same for Central Park, but yeah, it's just there's not much going on other than like there's Van Cortlandt in the Bronx where there's a little bit of,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it's limited.
Well, I mean, I would just because I mean Staten Island is known obviously for a lot of runners. A lot of runners come out of Staten Island. I mean, I certainly think about Brooklyn. I think about Marine Park. A lot of runners run in Marine Park, which is more southern Brooklyn, but more isolated from those areas. But I just found that fascinating, and I do want to say hello to Jules NYC. Good afternoon, Tom and Dane. Also, Fort Tyron Park. She says Fort Tyron Park. I'm sure that's a place you visited. And then I mean, what other countries have you run in? I mean, you talked about 13 countries. I find that fascinating. Where else have you gone that, people might know of?
Um,
Have
I mentioned Iceland. I've been to England. I've been to
Oh,
France.
we're in England. I have a lot of British wrestlers. Where in England have you
Just
been?
London, just London,
London?
which
Did you
I found very Manhattan-esque. Um,
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah, now
yeah,
that
kind
I've
of,
heard that.
other than the whole
Yeah.
like, drive on the other side of the road thing. But
Yeah, yes, yes, yes. I know.
where else? France, Germany, Austria, Czech Republic.
Have you done Canada?
Yeah, yeah, Canada, sure. Mexico, um, Costa Rica.
Where in Canada have you gone?
Just like, across the river, across the way from Buffalo. I've been to Montreal, Toronto. There's a ton of stuff I want to do there. It's just a matter of logistics. Um, I want to go check out the Canadian Rockies. I'd love to get over to, British Columbia.
I was gonna say I would think British Columbia would definitely be, a place you'd obviously want to do, and I could certainly see Toronto because Toronto's close to Niagara Falls. Obviously, it's one side is New York, the other side's Ontario. You've got obviously Toronto's not too far away, and you mentioned Quebec because I think Vermont and Quebec are almost right next to each other. In upstate New York, I believe there's one. I don't know if it's the Finger Lakes, but it's one of those small counties. You can actually go into Quebec through there. So Quebec and Ontario here is actually, pretty fascinating places. And also, Michael would like to say, I love this place in Indiana called Chano Lakes. Very peaceful. Being in a city is cool, but touching green is amazing. Have you
Yeah,
been to anything in Indiana, by the way?
never been in Indiana.
Really?
No.
What states have you been to any? So we do a lot of stuff with Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan. We do work with Tennessee. I think you mentioned Tennessee, Alabama. Have you been? We've done Maryland. I think you've been because obviously you mentioned Maine. You've probably been to Maryland, North Carolina. Have you been to a lot of those states?
I don't mean to like insult the flyover states, but for the most part, like East Coast, West Coast, with a little sprinkling of like Northwest, but a lot like Indiana, what you just mentioned, Missouri,
Yes.
Minnesota, I have not been to.
So what's the training like? You go to all these, really, really difficult and hard terrains. And what's a training like in terms of do you train year round? I mean, what's your day in and day habits like in order to continue to stay in this kind of condition?
So the way that I would train for backpacking is different than the way I train for running. People I used to think that by doing a bunch of cardio I could be okay when I go backpacking, but it doesn't really work that way. For backpacking, you really just have to have time with weight on your back. So what I would do is I would fill up sandbags or I would put free weights in my pack and then just go to the trails by me and just walk around for a couple hours. Because you got to condition your quads, your calves, your feet for blisters, your shoulders. I've made the mistake before of, trying to go do something without having time with the pack. And within a couple hours, your shoulders are just screaming from the
Oh
weight.
my God.
Yeah.
And so how do you deal with that pain? I mean, what happens then?
Baby steps. I mean, I'll start off doing, 45 minutes with the pack and then up it to an hour and a half. And then by the time you get to like 2 or 3, you're okay.
Now, we have a lot of wrestlers that come on here, and the ones that are a certain ilk, they tend to go and hit the gym and lift weights. Does lifting weights help you at all with this, or this is kind of something you try to avoid? Because you're in very good shape. I mean, I've seen your Instagram. People can check you out. You are, in good shape. I mean, you're definitely not going to Olive Garden for sure. But, do you need to hit the gym in terms of weightlifting, or is there a certain type of approach you go with?
So I think like with the wrestlers, I mean, listen, I'm a long distance runner at heart, so like I'm not a huge fan of weights.
Okay.
In the last 2 years or so, I've incorporated more cross training where I have right behind me like a rowing machine that I use.
I see that.
I
Yeah.
also do a lot of swimming, so that's what I do for
Okay.
upper body and push-ups really, but I don't really touch free weights.
because that would impact maybe more or less, I would say, what you're doing in terms of those running aspects, or kind of just in terms of the cardio that you need. I mean, I'm just curious on that.
Well, upper body's super important. I definitely should probably do more weightlifting. It's just I just don't like it. I'd rather go run for a couple hours than be in a gym lifting weights.
Absolutely. And let me get to a lot more comments here. If you end up doing the Indiana Trail 100, I'll see you. So listen, if you go to Indiana, Michael's on Facebook, and, I'm sure that you guys can link up. And Jules is talking about the fact here. She messaged that she was going to British Columbia. And if you ever go there, she would want to hike with you. So you're actually meeting people around the world that might want to, go along with you. That's kind of fascinating. And, she also said that you're hilarious and that she hopes that you go to British Columbia. Yeah, I definitely think British Columbia. I hear a lot of people really like British Columbia. It's Vancouver out there.
Yeah.
A lot of people really, really, really big into Vancouver. It's a really popular destination, more or less. And you got to follow on Instagram. So there you go. You got that. I mean, any other places of note that you've been to before I come back to Pez? But I'm really more fascinated for
All
the
right.
end
Yeah, no,
about
that's
Pez.
fine.
But any other places of note that you've been to that people should maybe want to explore or know about from you?
I think a lot of people think they have to travel all over the world to see really cool things, and there's so much stuff domestically that will blow your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, some of my favorite one of my favorite national parks is the Everglades in Florida, which is really easy to get to. You could fly to Miami, you could fly to Fort Lauderdale, and within a half hour you're in the swamp with gators all over the place.
Wow. So what's that like, going from Long Island to gators? I mean, what's
great.
that like?
It's great. But my point is, you could get in your car most places in America and within a couple hours be in another world.
Wow, that's fast. Yeah, people think Florida now. People think like it's just New York part two, but actually, a lot of Florida is very rural still. A lot of Florida still is,
Southern
more.
Florida is the Wild West. If you,
Yeah.
when you go to where the Everglades are, it is a whole different ball game down there.
Okay, we lost you there for a minute,
Oh,
but yeah, you were saying Florida, like the southern part of Florida.
yes.
Was the
No, I
Wild
just said
West.
Southern Florida is the Wild West. It's nothing like what you think of when you think of Florida.
Yeah, it's funny because again, people think now again Miami, they think South Beach, they think even Orlando to an extent, but really there's a lot of places in Florida that it's still very, southern. It's still very, again, not what you've seen where people from New York have fled to Florida. It's a different life, a different, I'm just curious. And you've been to all these countries, you've been to all these states. How has that changed your view of the world, the view of people, even as a whole? How has that changed your, impressions on people?
I think with the traveling around the world, at least what I've done over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, it's made me more grateful for what I have. When you see how other people live, and I don't mean that in like a judgmental way.
No. Say whatever you want. You can say anything you
we have
want.
a lot here, and when you see people that are truly living like day to day, meal to meal, it makes you appreciative. And as far as America goes, like I find no matter where I am, people are decent. You know what I mean? It's not like, I know there's like a lot of divisive, or I don't need to go. You know what I mean? But
You can say whatever you can say whatever you want on Sportswire.
yeah, all right. No,
long as you don't bash Sportswire, but you can say anything. You say anything.
I would
anything
never.
you want.
Are you kidding me? I love Sportswire.
All right, good, but go ahead. Floor is yours.
No, just that people here domestically are for the most part are good people, and they sometimes they hear you're from New York, they want to call you a Yankee and make fun of you a little bit, but for the most part, people are decent.
I feel like that when you take a step back, no matter where we are, as we're here with the great Dane, Mr. Dane Johnsen himself, of course, the marathon man, world pest collector, and I feel like people as a core, they want the same things. They want a better life. They want to be able to make a difference, and they want to be able to just, enjoy life. And I have a lot more people that want to say hello to you, so I'm going to say nothing.
Huh?
The Tribal Chief said he just gave you a follow on Instagram. He doesn't follow many people. It's true. He actually doesn't, because he's this big man, and, he obviously, he really doesn't follow people unless he thinks they're interesting, and he thinks you're interesting. I just gave this Pez head a follow, my kind of quirky character. Speaking of characters that we love here, it's his show here. He's in our Hall of Fame, Mr. Omen Black. He's the boogeyman of the Midwest. He's a hardcore god. And have you been to Iowa? Because I know you've run all over the place. You've been to Pez conventions. Have you been to Iowa by any chance?
No Iowa.
Would you like to go to Iowa? Because you might
I
have a
would
friend.
absolutely go to Iowa. Absolutely, yes.
Are there any Pez collectors in Iowa that you know of by any
They're
chance?
in all 50 states.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. So that's kind of fascinating. Are there like Pez? I want to talk about Pez because I think people find this
All right,
interesting.
let's do it.
So, are there like Pez meetup groups? Are there Pez like groups like where gather and chat? Like, I'm just curious on that because you mentioned the convention in Ohio, but talking about Pez because people find that fascinating. Like, do people like have Pez watch parties? I mean, like, what do people do?
So the bulk of the activity in the community is through Facebook, which
Okay.
I don't really use for anything else other than Pez, just because of all the politics and nonsense. But
Sure. Sure. I understand.
but that's where the bulk of the activity is, and it's just like networking, and there's sales pages. There's one called Pez Community where people show off what they got, or hey, do you want to trade, or that kind of thing. And then it could be more local too. Like you were asking before what my wife thinks of it. Like
Yes,
I've,
I think that was the most fascinating question. I
I've
was like,
met
"What does your
people,
wife think about Pez?"
but like I've gone to McDonald's parking lots to buy stuff off people. Like I, I've
So
gone into
you gotta talk about that. No. You
yeah.
you go to the McDonald's parking lot to buy. I feel like is this the Howard Stern show rather than Sportswire? So you gotta tell me you go to the McDonald's parking lot not to buy a Big Mac with cheese. You go out to buy Pez. You have to talk about that.
So sometimes you'll get lucky through Facebook Marketplace. Somebody local will list something, and you kind of do the barter thing. You negotiate,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and then you got to meet up with them. So sometimes people will say, "Come to my house," and they meet you on the stoop, and it's fine. But sometimes people want to meet in like a neutral location. So
Oh
I've
my
I've
god.
had times where people are like, "Let's meet at McDonald's." So I'm in the parking lot. We're sitting there with the trunks open, and they're showing me the stuff, and it's insane. It's insane. It's nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
McDonald's parking lot. Where's the weirdest place you've exchanged Pez? And I think that's the most fascinating thing I could ask you. Where's the weirdest place you've exchanged Pez? In the bathroom, I imagine?
No, not the bathroom. I've been in people's basements, like complete strangers that are, they found something from their mom, something old or whatever. And I've been in people's basements where I'm like, if they wanted me to disappear, I could disappear right now, and then nobody would find me.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. What's the most valued Pez collection that you have of all your Pez items? What's the most like if you had one or two, what's your most valued possession?
Um, I mean, I have ones that are more sentimental.
Yeah.
I'd have to go in the cases behind me to pull it, and I don't want to
Just
interrupt.
a few. I mean, yeah, don't pull
I don't
anything
want to
out.
interrupt your feed.
I don't want you to not come
I
back on
have a bunch of
Sportswire.
them here that I like. Like this one here is the creature from the Black Lagoon, and it came
Okay.
with this really really cool like pearly green translucent stem. I love this one.
Wow.
Um, I have this one here. It's what's called a full body. So the way it works is you put the candy in, right? And it's a
Ah,
robot, a space robot.
wow.
And this is pretty neat. And I'll just show you one more. Um,
You could show me 1,000. I mean, people think I have a lot of comments.
I
People are
got this
fascinated. I
one.
think it's
This is an
pretty
older
fascinating.
one. It's an old witch.
Okay.
What's kind of cool is if you look on the stem, instead of it saying Pez, there's actually a picture of a witch on there, which is pretty
Oh,
neat.
wow.
And it's got what's called an orange sleeve. So these are
Wow.
cool. But my absolute favorite is probably this guy.
Oh, wow.
He's what was called the bicentennial cowboy, and this is a white hat, which is borderline impossible to find.
Oh my god.
This
That's
guy's
it.
my favorite probably, and then I got some other neat ones here.
Yeah,
But
okay. I know people really want to talk to you, and I'm gonna let them do that in a minute. But is there a way that you keep them in a certain with baseball cards, it was like, okay, well, you have to you can't bend the four corners, you can't put fingerprints on them. Is there a way, like, do you keep the Pez in a certain condition if that's a thing?
yeah, so the way like kind of what you said about baseball cards, like conditions everything.
Yep.
So if you have a dispenser, and I'm not gonna go on this too long, but I'll take this Indian that I have here. If it has scratches, breaks in the stem, melts, if there's cracks in the plastic, all of that affects the value. So the older stuff, the stuff that's pre, let's say 1985, that you want to take care of. So I have cases in the back that I keep them in. I mean, I could show you really quickly. I could move the laptop and show you. But I keep them in plexiglass cases so that they're A, off the ground so my kids can't attack them, and B, like they're protected from dust.
You have twins, yeah. I mean, but
Yeah.
you know, do you why pre-85?
So in the community, like it's pre 85 ish, 84, 83. That's what's considered vintage. So that's the older stuff, and that's most desirable. The newer Pez for the most part are not nearly as don't have as much value to them. They were mass produced.
That's like what happened with baseball cards. Baseball cards got mass produced around the time of the late 80s, and then it was like anything pre like 19, I would say like 82, 83 is like considered to be like the holy grail, and anything after that, it's worth whatever unless you go into graded cards and autographs. So do you then buy like each year the new Pez? Do you still like buy like each year that comes out? Do you like go and buy that, or you just go for like the rare vintage?
I do. Like most of what you see to my, I guess, right, that's what are called commons. That's stuff that ranges from $2 to $10, nothing crazy.
Yeah.
The older stuff in the last couple years has kind of been what my focus is, because I like the hunt. I like hunting for them. I like trading for them and that kind of thing.
Baseball cards and other sporting cards used to have a magazine called Beckett. Beckett used to be able to tell you what an average baseball card was. I remember as a kid growing up, going to when it was a thing, although it's kind of come back a little bit now, like sporting card stores. You have autographs, collectibles, and you would buy the Beckett magazine to see, if I pulled out a rookie card or so-and-so, what it would be worth. Although I never sold it, because I explained I didn't need to sell it, and I have the sentimental value. And, when I'm dead, you can take my cards and maybe sell it then. But do you have like a magazine or a source that tells you what the Pez's are worth?
Yeah, so there's this guy, he's the godfather. His name is John Laspina, and he every year he produces this big spiral book that's a price guide, and in the community we call it the Pez Bible, because it shows the fluctuation in prices. It gives you a baseline if you're going to sell, about what you should be asking. It goes into detail about every Pez that's ever been produced. So that's
it's almost like in wrestling we have a journalist called Dave Meltzer, and Dave Meltzer is considered, when he rates every match, he rates every pay-per-view, every event, and he's kind of like basically the person, although he's very controversial. But I have a lot of comments because people don't want to hear my opinions. They want to hear themselves. So let's let them have the opportunity. Omen Black is a secret Chet of the Table fan. Hope you're well. My future opponent would love to see that. Ethan Sorensen, how you doing, Ethan? Dane is not a wrestler. He's the world's Pez collector, and he's a marathon runner. So you can put away the question about him wrestling, because he's here to talk about something else. But if Dane wants to wrestle, I'm sure we can help him out. But I don't think he wants to go into that. His wife would kill him, literally. He's got Pez already. All the Pez around the world you could think of. His wife's tolerating that. She probably wouldn't tolerate him being in the ring. Jules likes to say, I love the Everglades. Took an airboat tour there. Blah, blah, blah. So let me repeat. I love the Everglades. Took an airboat tour there when I used to live in Miami. Very fascinating flora and fauna. Plus had some alligator tail and alligator sausage afterwards. Very delicious. Have you ate the same thing? Have you ate alligator?
I did exactly that. I tried alligator nuggets, and I took a airboat tour.
So safe to say that these weren't in McDonald's, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend alligator nuggets.
So what made you want to have, and people like Jules, to eat alligator tail, alligator sausage, alligator nuggets? What was the reason why you woke up and said, I'm going to have alligator?
I think it's when in Rome. If you're somewhere exotic and they have exotic food, you got to try it.
Yeah, I guess, I got to be honest, not to say I'm a vegetarian. I mean, I still eat meat, but I'm a lot more thoughtful, I would say, when I eat meat, because I'm always kind of thinking, well, again, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not that, but I've always been more thoughtful on, what's in front of me. And maybe it's kind of been my reflective thoughts on the world, but I certainly appreciate that you've had alligator. Any other exotic foods you've eaten that maybe the audience would love to know about? Because that's fascinating, people. You've had alligator, okay, but any other exotic foods you've had that probably I and others haven't had?
I'll tell you two quick. So
Tell me 100 if you want.
I'm not going to tell you 100. We'll be here all night.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So when I was in Iceland, they have this delicacy there. I'm not going to try to say the name because I'll butcher it, but it's fermented shark.
Okay.
So they have sharks and they obviously kill them, and then they put them in these, like, I guess kind of like coffins, and they let them ferment the way you would ferment, like, whatever. And then they stay there for like a week or so, and they serve them at restaurants, and it has like an ammonia smell to it. It's awful, but it's a delicacy, and they like it, and I tried that. And a couple of years back, one of my students from Ecuador came in, and she had brought something in tinfoil that kind of looked like a hamster. And I said to her, I'm like, "What are you eating?" And she goes, "Oh, my grandmother made it. It's called gui." And it turns out that there's a delicacy in Ecuador where they eat guinea pigs. Like, and I asked her, I said, "Could you bring me in some gui?" And she said, "Sure." And I tried it, and it kind of tastes like chicken.
Wow. Guinea pig. So you've had guinea pig. Okay. You've had hamster. Interesting. I'm sure, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about eating skunk. I'm sure you've probably had skunk. No
skunk.
Okay. I've heard through the grapevine, through a birdie or two, that you're a big wings eater. Have you had like alligator wings? Have you had like hamster wings? Have you had like, I don't know. Have you eaten Sonic the Hedgehog for all I know?
No exotic animal wings, just straight buffalo.
Just straight buffalo. So nothing.
I mean, I've had some really awful, like, ghost pepper, Carolina Reaper wings, but that's just the.
And you sure you haven't eaten like Sonic the Hedgehog, or you sure you haven't? Okay, all right, the Lion King or anything like that. Have you had lion? You were in Kenya and Tanzania.
No, I don't even know if that's legal.
Okay, I would have said, if you would have told me, I would have said, yeah, I believe you. A rowing machine is an excellent all-around body workout. I used to be on the crew team, and I really miss it. Would you suggest a rowing machine with a water bowl or a magnetic one?
I don't know. The one that I have is like, it's a chain. It's a resistance. A resistance-based one. I've heard good things about the water one, but I'm not sure.
Good enough. Tom, don't make me laugh. I just had a soda come out of my mouth. He was something else I said that was funny. It was a couple things he found fascinating. People actually are tuned in. They want to hear you. Strangest place I met someone was Jimmy Pop from the Bloodhound Gang. I heard of the Bloodhound Gang in a male toilet. I'm going to Google him right now. In fact, where has he been the last 15 years? I told you. Didn't I tell you that there would have been somebody that would have met somebody in a bathroom somewhere? Didn't I tell you? I told you that would have happened. So, McDonald's parking lot ain't so weird after all. What made you? I think we spoke about it, but do you want to talk about it again? You can talk about it if you want, but have you met the Pez Outlaw?
I have.
You have? Oh, you must talk about that.
So he was in Cleveland the last 2 years. He kind of hangs out in the lobby, and he'll sign stuff for you. He'll talk to you. He'll take pictures. Really nice guy. Really nice guy.
Were you starstruck? Were you like, oh my God, it's the Pez Outlaw? So what happened when you met him?
No, I didn't get starstruck.
No, so but were a lot of people.
But honestly, Tom, like, after this interview, you should totally go check the movie out. Like, it's a good movie.
I have to be honest. I will try to. Although I promise you, when I'm home, usually what I'm watching, you'll probably laugh, is usually somebody's wrestling match because they're coming on Sportswire Radio. So these days, people ask me, you'll laugh. People ask me, I haven't heard from you. I haven't spoke to you. Where have you been? I say, usually I'm on Sportswire Radio. Check me out, or I'm watching somebody's wrestling match around the world. So that's usually what I'm doing. I have no other interest other than that. I'm only kidding, but it's mostly true. I have some more comments here. I mean, the most exotic I've had was Rocky Mountain oysters, bull parts. Wasn't too bad. You know anything about that? Rocky Mountain oysters?
Yeah, he had bull balls. That's a little rough.
Wow. Okay. So I guess not to be confused with the old AC/DC song, Big Balls, where Bon Scott, the famous singer, said, I've got big balls. And we'll obviously leave the rest of the lyrics there because it's Bon Scott's song. It's not my song. And we're a family station. You might have family listening. Yeah, that's kind of what I think there. I mean, when it comes to the world of Pez, I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about that we should know of, or anything else that's most fascinating before I get to more comments? I just find that,
I mean, I could talk about it all day. I just don't, like, without any direction.
So I got one for you. What does Jason Facina think about Pez?
He makes fun of me constantly, all the time.
Well, if he's making fun of you, you should tell him to lay off the breadsticks at Olive Garden. No,
I'm pleading the fifth again.
you have played the fifth again. Do people want to? Do people look at it and tell you, you should stop collecting Pez, or what are you doing? Do you ever get that? I mean, like, do people want your autograph?
No, please, no. No, I think what's cool now is that a lot of people, that I'm friends with, they have small kids, and when they come over, I give them candy, I give them extra dispensers, and they like it. It's like a bonding thing.
Do you think your kids will wind up being Pez collectors as
I
well? Do
hope
you want
not.
that?
I
Why?
hope.
Wait. Why would you say you hope? People usually, like, for example, we do a lot of wrestling on Sportswire, and many times wrestlers have gone on in the footsteps of their father, their grandfather, or we have athletes come on the show and, they go in the footsteps of their father or their uncle, whatever it is. But you're this, world-renowned Pez collector. I mean, why wouldn't you want your kids to follow in your footsteps?
I was kidding. I mean, listen, I just hope they have something, whatever that thing is that they're passionate about. I think people need hobbies. I think they need something to like give them purpose. So if they end up being into Pez, great.
All right, we want to give Coach actually a big apology, Coach Facina, because he says he's actually not an Olive Garden person. It's actually another Jason that we've confused all the time. His name's Jason Gordieso, and obviously he needs to then lay off the Olive Garden. And Coach Facina is saying he is not an Olive Garden person, but rather a King Umberto's person. Okay, that makes sense, because King Umberto's is certainly, if you're on Long Island and you like
Oh, yeah.
pizza, King Umberto's would be a much better choice than Olive Garden, because Olive Garden, to me, certainly, whoever it might be, Coach G, maybe you should lay off the breadsticks, and Coach Facina will stick to King Umberto's. But I do have some more comments. I watch quirky documentaries. The Pez Outlaw was the one with the Dawn Wall. Another, if it's something I don't know about, I will definitely watch it like the whole show. It's been ace. Do you know anything about other documentaries on Pez? Actually, that's a good question.
I don't. I know that there's a movie called The Dawn Wall. If he's talking about a rock climbing movie, I'm
Yeah,
not sure if that's
think so.
that movie was phenomenal. I don't know if that's what he's talking about, but
I think similar. He said I think he's talking about quirky documentaries
yeah,
in general.
I haven't really had a whole lot of time to watch documentaries recently, so.
Well, you're collecting Pez and you're getting ready to go into Nicaragua. I mean,
It's a full-time job.
are you going anywhere this summer that people might want to visit you?
I'm going back to Cleveland.
Oh, go back. And now, when is Cleveland, by the way? So we have people out there that might want to visit you.
Pezmania. It's the biggest.
I like it, Pezmania. This is good. What number are we up to? Do you have like a Pezmania?
I want to say they're up to 30. It's either 30, 32 maybe.
Oh, wow. You know what? We're celebrating WrestleMania 40 in April, and you're going to go to Pezmania 32, and that's going to take place when?
That's, I think, the third week of July they hold it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Right in the middle of summer. Wow. Pezmania 32. And that's kind of cool. I mean, do people like plan for this like ahead of time?
Oh,
like,
yeah. I go for 2 days and I stay in the hotel, but I mean, there's people that are there for a week. They get a good turnout. There's probably upwards of 1,000 people that descend upon Cleveland for this.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
1,000 people. I would never. Wow. 1,000 people. Now, do other
I might be a little high on that, but it's a lot of people.
Do like famous people come and visit? Do you get like celebrities, personalities come and like,
None of that.
No, but you don't. But just to confirm, you don't sign any autographs at this convention.
No.
Because I would say, if you wanted, we could certainly maybe arrange it. I think it actually, I actually think this would be fascinating. If I came by one day to your house and interviewed you with the Pez, I think, I think that would be, if Jason Facina thinks that would be something he would have time to attend to. I actually think in a couple months when the weather gets warmer, I would actually want to do that. Maybe not too warm, but, maybe like in March or April. I think that would be kind of fascinating. And I think that's, really cool at the Pez. I like it. I like quirkiness. Like I said, I think you're in the right place. I have also, I think you answered the question already, but the only documentary is the Pez Outlaw, right?
There's another one that came out a while ago called Pez Heads the Movie that kind of goes more in. It's a low budget. It doesn't have the production value of Pez Outlaw, but that goes into like if you're a collector of anything, you could relate to that. What's in that movie, whatever you're. Yeah,
that's fascinating. Yeah, that's fascinating. And the tribal cheese will get your autograph. Well, I think that the tribal cheese has got a massive autograph collection, just like Mr. Johnsen has an awesome Pez collection. And certainly great minds think alike. when in Rome, I'm one of those people that likes to try different activities and different meals. One of my favorite foods was bull's testicles. Have you had bull's testicles?
I can't say I have.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to have bull's testicles anytime soon. Tastes exactly like foie gras, which I love. Is it foie gras? How do I say that correctly? But I haven't had it before. Have you ate that also? I
No,
haven't.
no, sir.
Okay. Maybe I'm gonna. You know what? Maybe I am gonna stick to breadsticks at Olive Garden instead, because that sounds a lot more neutral for me. I think breadsticks at Olive Garden, I think I'm more comfortable with than a foie gras. But I loved CUY too. That's the food you
Yeah,
had before you went.
that's the guinea pig.
Okay, and I had it at an Ecuadorian restaurant in Queens. Okay, I mean, the guinea pig at least sounds a little bit more, I guess, I would say interesting. I don't know if I would have bull's testicles, but hey, you know what? Each to its own. People would say, that's obviously, what else? Obviously, in the remaining time that I have, and obviously this has been, I hope actually, would you want to come back on Sportswire
This
again?
is great. I
Would
love
you,
it.
would you want to
Great.
come back? I gotta be honest with you, I didn't know what to expect, but I got people that are actually like they're fascinating. I mean, when do you plan to buy more Pez or a big new like Pez
Tonight,
collection head?
right now.
Okay, so you know what? I think I got to come by here one time, and I really think if I do an interview, I know Coach is messaging me about this, and yeah, I think I got to come by here one of these days. And if I do the interview, I got to figure a way to do it. I do have I have a portable mic. I have like 8 lights in the back. I can't bring all 8 lights to your house, but I think it'd actually be really fascinating if I came by and interviewed you with your Pez collection. I think people would really find that fascinating. So I have to figure a way to do that. We'll definitely talk about that. But is there anything upcoming before I get to closing notes that you're looking forward to when it comes to collecting Pez? Anything that's on your mind that you want to purchase next?
Oh, yeah, I got my eye on a few things. You got to be careful because if you tell people you're looking for it, then
Oh, so there's a lot of there's competition.
yeah, yeah.
So it's like a lot of limited edition stuff, I would assume.
Well, the older stuff is what everybody wants. So because it's high in demand, if you get a lead or something like that, you got to keep it quiet.
Do people play with Pez, or when they buy it, or they just like leave it and don't touch it for like the rest of their life?
It's you were talking about baseball cards before. I mean,
Yep.
how often you have it, you know where it is. I have mine displayed so that I can look at it. But I don't, some of these are 50, 60 years old, so I don't want to mess with them too much. They could break.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's kind of how I would probably see it. That if I had it and they're 40, 50 years old or even older than that, that I would, definitely not want to touch them and just have them on display. I mean, what a display. It almost to me reminds me of I've had wrestlers come on and show their Funko Pops and show
Yeah,
their
there's more in
collectibles.
the corner over there too.
Wow.
It's the whole basement.
Well, I got to be honest. I like it. I think that, you know what? It's pretty cool. It's unique. I think people are getting to see something different. I think people are getting to see that there's, other things out there. And I give you a lot of credit. And I think what I learned today also that Pez is 100 years old. I mean, who would have thought that Pez, in a lot of ways, is older or maybe as old as collecting sporting cards, especially baseball cards. People think about, the Hannes Wagner and the Ty Cobb baseball cards. And actually, no, it's Pez that's been around, just as long or if not longer than cards. And there's a devoted following, and you're one of the people in the community. And we're speaking to you live on Sportswire Radio. I mean, frankly, I think Pez is more interesting than going to Nicaragua.
We didn't talk about ultra distance running. But it's okay.
I could talk about it for a few
minutes.
No,
it's okay. Another time.
Okay. Or fair enough. All right. So obviously, you're going to definitely come back. I'm going to definitely have you on more often because I think this is really fascinating. And you've obviously done things on Long Island. If you want to talk about that in the closing thoughts, you can. But is there anything else you'd like to plug, share, or say before we let you go figure out what Pez to buy next? Or what race to run?
No plugs needed. It was a tremendous honor to be on your show. I've been a casual fan for a while. I'm going to tune in now because I got to hear all the wrestling action. But
we actually have, you think, this would be, just kind of quirky. Like, we have wrestlers that are in the backyard. We have wrestlers that are quote unquote called the underground, meaning that think of it like, okay, you're a competitive runner, but not quite a competitive runner. They're sort of trained, but they're not trained, if that makes sense, but they're called underground. They're indoors. Then we have what's called deathmatch wrestlers or hardcore wrestlers. Those are guys that go out there. Well, we had one guy, you find this really interesting. We had one guy who's very well known right now, Mikey Anarchy. He actually showed his back, and you could play connect the dots with it. Then we had another guy, Obey, who actually pulled a gun out. I would not recommend this. He pulled a gun out on the air to basically show what he's going to do to his opponent. Then there is what's called independent wrestling, which is very common throughout the scene. We have British wrestling, which the tribal cheese is an amazing part of. We have our pro wrestling. So we pretty much cover really everything. That's why our hashtag is all wrestling matters. And maybe we're going to say the hashtag all Pez matters on Sportswire. All Pez matters. And you know what? If you're out there and you collect Pez, and if you're in the Pez community, I'm going to do this here right now before closing thoughts. You don't have to plug anything. I'm going to make a plug on behalf of the Pez community. Here's my message. So for those that are listening and watching, let me speak. For those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryce, if you collect Pez and you're a part of the Pez community, you want to talk about it, I'll give you the floor anytime you want on Sportswire Radio. And if you want to tell your friends about Pez here on this platform, you want to tell your friends about Sportswire Radio, I would be more than happy to have you on anytime, because at this point, it all fits in. It all has a story. It all has a message, and everybody deep down probably collects something. So if you have friends in the Pez community, they want to come on and talk about Pez, by all means, come on down to Sportswire Radio. So that's my message. And before we sign off, foie gras is deliciously overfed goose liver. Don't think I'm having that anytime soon.
No.
I'm gonna stick to plain Italian bread. Plain, when I go to the store and get Italian bread, and I think that's what I'm gonna stick with. Plain Italian bread. Maybe I should become a vegetarian or just stick to pizza. Same thing. I'll ask this one more question. Is there a thing as autographed Pez's?
Yeah. So what people do, and this isn't really my bag, but they'll go to for example, like I had Yoda before. Yeah. They'll go to like a Comic-Con, or they'll go to like
Adam Driver.
And they'll have the voice actor, the character actor, they'll have them sign the inside sleeve. And that could turn, a $1 Pez into $150 Pez with the autograph on it.
It's a good, you know what? That's a good one, Ethan. That's a good one. The tribal cheese probably would be into that. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, you know what? Autograph Pez actually would be a thing, because you see it. We'll go after this. There's wrestlers sometimes, the big ones. I mean, the ones on Sportswire, yes, we get their autographs, but the real, not the real ones, but the really well-known ones, there'll be people, which is really, it's a sick thing. They'll have people go to the airport. They'll know which airport they go to, and they'll want them sign 100 different things at once, when the wrestler wants to only sign one or two. I mean, again, each to its own. But, I think that with Pez, I didn't know that there would be one or two things that people would want signed. I think that's very fascinating. And I think that the Tribal Cheese is on YouTube at Mad Manx. He does a lot of great stuff with collectibles. And maybe, he can certainly link up with you, and we can have Pez conventions and a Tribal Cheese convention. Maybe the Tribal Cheese, you know what? Actually, the Tribal Cheese is legendary for his collectibles. Maybe the Pez collection outlaws, everybody else out there, the Pez from the Pez community, can fly the Tribal Cheese to Cleveland, and he can sign stuff for them, and he can get Pez in exchange. That'd be a really cool thing, because we used to see, didn't countries around the world exchange goods with each other? So maybe we can exchange the Tribal Cheese in exchange for Pez. You can see my wheels now leaving Sportswire for good. Nah, I'm not an autograph collector. I don't have any room, because people, they want to see me here. No, I'm not collecting any autographs. Jules, I'm sure that you might want to get a thing or two. So maybe you can get foie gras signed. Maybe you can get, when you have your foie gras signed, you can get maybe somebody to sign the foie gras before you eat, if that's such a thing, right? Maybe you can do something if you're going out there to have the alligator tails. Maybe you can get the alligator to hang up on your basement wall or something like that, kind of how people have deer hang up on their wall when they shoot the deer. Maybe you can have that instead. But obviously I could talk to you all day, but you're a busy man. You're getting ready for Pez conventions. You're getting ready to maybe do another ultra marathon race, another country that you're going to think about next, and obviously get ready to go back to the classroom. This is how you follow Dane Johnsen. You have been awesome. I can't wait to have you back on here in a few months. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure. And thank you, Jason Facina, all kidding aside, for giving us another great opportunity to speak to somebody really, really fascinating, really, really cool and unique. And I can't wait to do this again. Thank you, Coach. Coach has been one of my biggest supporters throughout the 5 years. And I can't wait maybe one of these days to interview you from your basement and get a chance to see some of this and not touch it, obviously, but definitely get a chance to see it all of it. I want to thank the Tribal of Cheese for all of his support over the years and everybody else out there. But my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice of all wrestling. We were here with the world's pest collector, the marathon man himself, the great Dane Johnsen. If you're on Sportswire Radio on all of our platforms, you're going back to your regularly scheduled programming. I'll be back here at 11 o'clock Eastern time to induct into the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame the one and only Dark Crown and Matthew Forsaken. And maybe next time when I come to your basement, maybe I'm going to ask you that question if you want to be in the Hall of Fame. Because you know what? That might be an actual question that could be a good one. So stay tuned. You might get into the Hall of Fame next time. Thank you, Mr. Johnsen. Yes, and thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for following me on Twitch. Spread the word on Twitch that we're on Sportswire Radio, and we'll see you, sir. Thanks a lot, my friend, very, very soon. And Tom Bryce is staying where he wants to be, and that's yes, I'm staying in Sportswire. They don't want me in the Pez community. You guys don't want me. You guys do not want this. You don't want a Howard Stern of backyard and other wrestling. You want your own community. I do want to talk to your community, but yeah, I need to stay on Sportswire because nobody wants me in Pez. They barely want me in wrestling. They don't want me in Pez. So yes, thank you, Ethan, for confirming that. But until then, I'll see everybody later. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on the number one. That is Sports.